You are listening to the Brain Profits Podcast. We bring awareness to the reality that, in large, people allow their brains to control them, which is causing difficulty at school, at work, and in life.
Success in life and business starts in the brain. Therefore, we want to explore the challenges that exist for people and organizations so that they are in control of their brains and not the other way around.
Listen in, be inspired, and take back control of your brain, and you'll create optimal results in your life, organization, and community.
Ready to start the show? We are, so let's go. So what's up, guys? Philippe, man, Stacy, how have you guys been? How's your weeks going?
Hey, Doug. Hey, Philippe.
Hey, how are you guys?
Go
ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I've been great aside from this really weird guy that came up to my shopping cart last night at the grocery store. Instead of teasing me by grabbing for my wallet, he grabs my grapes and apples. And I was like, yeah, you probably could use those. Go for it.
Dunkin' Donuts, right?
A random sighting of Doug. Yeah. Doug, don't tell him what else was in my cart besides all those apples and grapes that you were stealing.
Oh yeah, that's funny because you know what? Only thing I really noticed real fast was the giant boxes of goldfish. It's like, Stacy, you gonna buy all the store's goldfish?
Yeah, that's all you had to say was that's a lot of goldfish. Yep.
Yeah, so
golden session and it's on sale.
I forgot about school starting.
You know that goldfish are at the base of Maslow's hierarchy, and so yeah, you have to have goldfish to live. So
I thought it was just for toddlers, but our 13-year-old, I mean, we don't have him in the house. We're having some psychological breakdown without that basic need. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, people, you have just heard our guest, Dr. Jerry Askew. He's coming on the pod and gracing us with his presence. He is a friend and mentor of mine personally, and he's done a lot of big things. He's one of the guys behind the scenes that you never have heard of here in the Tennessee area. But how you been doing, Jerry?
My life is too good. It's really good. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So,
it's funny. So today I ran across a really sort of inspiring video on Instagram, and then I reshared it on my Instagram. And it was basically what you need to live a fulfilling and happy life. And it said that first you need to be physically fit, then you need to be mentally fit, then you need to be spiritually fit, and then you need to be financially fit. And so in light of Jerry's clerical collar and that video today, I am super excited for this podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you, and I'm glad that you saw that living a meaningful life requires more than just any one thing, but spirituality is a big part of it.
Absolutely.
That's true. Let's get into it. Jerry, tell the people about yourself a little bit of background to start there.
Well, that's always an interesting question because most people start with the resume things. And I think I would start with the fact that I am a husband to a terrific woman who has her own career. She's a very successful attorney. And she is supporting me in the manner to which I plan to become accustomed. And and I have two grown children, both happily married, and 4 grandchildren, ranging from about 10 months to 8 years. And so I'm incredibly blessed. I moved to Knoxville in 1985 as the Dean of Students at the University of Tennessee, and had been 4 years in Chapel Hill and 3 years in Memphis and 3 years in Columbus, Ohio, and 3 years in Miami, Florida. And I came here and thought I'd be 4 years here, and got married and made babies. And before you knew it, it was home. So since coming here, I've been a university dean and a foundation president and a healthcare executive and a nonprofit CEO. and I've had a lot of really wonderful experiences. And along the way, at the ripe old age of 62, I was ordained in the Episcopal Church, and I am a deacon, and as of about a year ago, became the Archdeacon of the Episcopal Diocese of East Tennessee. So I've seen a lot of life and a lot of people during that time.
As it occurs to me, each time I hear that path for Jerry, it occurs to me that you have an art of continuing to create, recreate, add to the sculpture of who you are. That there's so many, you pass through it super fast, but all of those things, those, for some folks, that's one full life path, career path, and you continue to build out. That's
Well, it's interesting. That was not the path I intended to be on. My wife and I both have careers, and when we were married, and I was here, I knew I was going to be here for a while. But then in higher education, my path was to be a university president, and but the path up in higher education is more likely by moving. If you want to move up, you got to move out. And my wife she was building a wonderful career here, and she's just so good at what she does. And when it came time to move for my next move, it was like she was going to have to make major sacrifices. And so I'm not being wonderful. I'm just saying we came to the conclusion that maybe we needed to stay here and build a life here for our family. And so that's what we chose to do together. And we've been equal partners. But what it was, then it became incumbent on me to build a meaningful career here. And fortunately, I've been given so many opportunities to do interesting things. And so I was invited back once to speak to some students at the University of Tennessee about my career. And I said, well, the problem is I haven't really had a career. I've had a series of loosely related, really interesting jobs. And so if you want to hear about that, I can talk about that all day. But I've been really blessed to have the opportunity to work on interesting things that, in my view, were all meaningful.
Well, you know what I think is really interesting about that is, so one of the things that I talk to people about, that I believe that the meaning of life is about evolution, and not evolution of the species, but evolution of the individual. Mm-hmm. And so when I hear you talk about your life, it's all about adaptation and evolving. Right. And I think that that's phenomenal, because so many people don't realize that that's what life is about.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that in my world, we talk about God. A lot of my friends don't think of God in the way that I think of God, and that's fine. I had a person recently who was adamant that she was an atheist, and I said, well, why don't you tell me about this God you don't believe in, because I bet I don't believe in that God either. So there are currents in the world that lead us, if we allow it, toward meaning. But we have to put ourselves in a situation where we can hear those voices. And of course, that's a metaphor. We don't really hear the voices, but I think there is a force in the universe. There is a reality in the universe that is beyond our five senses' ability to comprehend. And every great wisdom tradition has another name for it, but they're all very similar. And so creating an environment where you can find a way to be at one with that current, and then let that current take you along, is really important. To live a meaningful life, I think, is very much about finding a way to connect with something larger than yourself. And that is both an intellectual exercise, and a spiritual exercise. But you have to be willing to acknowledge, first and foremost, that there is something larger than our egos. And for me, I spend my life as as a clergy person, trying to help people connect with that larger thing.
Well, you may find this a little hard to believe because in medicine, we don't talk about God much, but in the way that I, sort of practice and teach, I spend a lot of time talking about God because for me, the parts of us that are most God-like are our brains and our spirits, because our brains are capable of creating. And I believe that our brain is the part of us that really connects us to God. So in fact, right before hopping on this podcast, when I was trying to decide what I was going to eat for dinner, I thought to myself, if God was coming to your house tonight for dinner, what would you feed God? Would it be some takeout, or would it be the food that God has naturally put on this planet?
You mean it wasn't loaves and fishes?
So,
God already did that. When I was in healthcare, I worked for a faith-based healthcare company, and we often talked about the difference between healing and curing. And it would be nice if we could cure everyone who came to us, but the truth is that a lot of times people come to us too badly broken to be cured, just too disease-ridden to be cured. But we found that we could always participate in the healing process. We could always help people get over their fear. We found that we could always help people become comfortable with where they were, even if it weren't a place that they wanted to be. I can't tell you how many times I saw families heal around the deathbed of a loved one. And so a big part of my ministry is healing. It grew out of a trip. My wife sent me to a monastery for the first 20 minutes, my wife sent me to a monastery for our 20th anniversary. That was what she gave me for her gift. And many argued that was a gift to herself, of course.
I was just thinking that. I was not going to ask it, but I was curious. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say she sent you to a monastery for the first 20 years of your marriage. I was going to be like, wow.
And that may have been her choice, but when I went, because I was wrestling with whether I should be a priest, and she said basically, look, I don't care if you're a priest, kids don't care if you're a priest, but we're really tired of hearing about it. So you go and you and God, I'm going to send you this monastery and you and God figure it out. Don't come home till you do. And amazingly, God said, and again, I speak metaphorically, but God said to me that your fourfold ministry is first father. Said you've got two kids who love you, and unfortunately you're taking care of everybody's kids but your own. You need to be a better father. The second thing was you need to be a better husband. Your second ministry is to be a better husband. You're married to a woman who knows more about you than anybody else in the universe, and she loves you anyway. You need to become, this is what was written in my journal. You need to become the man that your wife thinks you already are. Which was a tall order. And then the third thing was you are a healer. You've always been a healer, and it's not coincidental that you're involved in the healing ministry at your church. It's not coincidental that you're working for a faith-based healthcare hospital system. You need to continue to be a healer because the world needs healers. And then finally, said the message I got, it was written in my journal. I say that it was almost as if it were automatic writing, but said there are men all over the world, and it was interesting that that in my journal it said men. It didn't say people. It said there are men all over the world who are trying to figure out who I want them to be, walk with them. And so I came out of that with a fourfold ministry: father, husband, healer, guide. And you may notice that none of those said priest. In fact, when I look back in my journal, it said in my journal was written, I don't want you to be a priest. You think if you're a priest, your mother will love you. And so I had a lot of unpacking to do about that, which led me down a pathway of understanding how wounds from youth can really have a big impact on adult life. So you see the collar in the Episcopal tradition, there are 3 clergy offices: bishops, priests, and deacons. Bishops are over a geographic area. Priests are pastors in an individual church, and deacons are pastors out in the world. Our charge is to be the prophetic voice of the poor. And so I'm a deacon, I'm not a priest. And so I came back and had a lot of work to do. It turns out that I had 6 adverse childhood experiences, and those experiences have a lot to do with who I am today. But it's taken a lot of work to make those those positive things, as you might imagine.
Wow. Yeah. So your background has led you from I know president of organizations and executive and so other organizations, and it leads me to think that you've worked alongside lots of people over the years, right? Higher level, lower level people, and you've helped them along the way. But as you've helped people, and some have reported to you or even not, or those who may be your peers, how have you identified the challenges, specifically more so in the workplace? And I know you kind of got out of it, but as you have left it, how have you identified some of the challenges that you see people facing that kind of stem from their inability to think at high levels as you saw it?
Yeah.
Or lack thereof?
Well, the first thing I think we all need to do is try to learn each other's stories. We create our identities by telling ourselves stories about who we are. And for me, the story I told myself for years and years and years was that I was a victim, and that I had so much trouble in my childhood. And all of that happens to be true. But I learned very quickly that defining myself as a victim wasn't getting me anywhere. And that it was only half the story, that the more accurate view of myself and the more effective view of myself was to define myself as a victor, that I had overcome all of those things, not by myself, by the way. I tell the story, in fact, I'm going to come back to your question, Doug, but I was a Boy Scout and an Eagle Scout, and we were having Boy Scout Sunday at my church one day, and the powers that be asked me to get up and make the big pitch, because that Sunday we were raising money for the Boy Scout troop we were sponsoring. And I got up and I had all my little speech ready, and I had my cards with me about all the statistics about why Boy Scouts are good and all. And I got up in front of the church, and I was about to start my pitch, and I realized that I was in the midst of having a vision. Now, I'd read about visions, and I may have had a few visions in college on Saturday night, but
different kind of vision, hopefully, when you're representing the Boy Scouts.
I don't believe that's the kind of vision they talk about in the Bible. But while I was standing there about to start my presentation, I had a vision. And if you know anything about Episcopal churches, almost every one of them has an aisle down, a center aisle. And as I stood there in front of the church, the center aisle down the middle of the church was a bowling alley. And I stood there for a minute, and I was mesmerized. And it probably, people out in the audience in the congregation probably thought I was having a stroke or something. But I'm standing there and I'm seeing this bowling alley in front of me, and I realized that the speech that I was prepared to make was no longer relevant. And I put my cards in the pocket, and I said, "How many of you have ever been bowling?" And everybody raised their hand. And I said, "How many of you have ever been kiddie bowling?" And most of them raised their hand. I said, what's the difference between kiddie bowling and adult bowling? It's the bumpers. And I said, we're all bowling balls when we were born. Our moms pop us out down the lane of life, but none of us are popped straight down the lane. All of us veer to the left or we veer to the right. The only difference between the children who make it all the way to the pins are the ones versus the ones that end up in the gutter. The difference is the bumpers. And Boy Scouts are bumpers. But for me, what it highlighted for me was how many bumpers I had in my life. And so when I say I'm a victor, that's not a personal claim. I'm a victor because when I veered to the left or I veered to the right, I always had bumpers who would bump me back into the middle. And some of them were Boy Scouts, some of them were my best friend's parents, some of them were my girlfriend's dad, some of them were church, coaches, all of those things. So that's a long way into my answer, Doug, is that I think we have to learn each other's stories to understand what's going on. And but what I have come to understand that one of the biggest challenge that people have in terms of being effective in their work is that we spend time either in the past or in the future. We spend time regretting the past or looking at the past and through rose-colored glasses and wishing we could go back to it, or we live our lives fearing the future. Oh, what if I get fired? What if everybody quits if I'm the boss? What if I run out of money? What if I do all that? And so we go through life either living in the past or the future, and we miss the present. And there's so many distractions today that keep us from focusing. And so one of the things I've tried to work with my people on is to develop disciplines that help them to live in the moment, to live in the present, so that they can focus well on what they actually need to do in their work. I think it's a spiritual practice as well, but in terms of effectiveness at work, being able to overcome distractions. So many of our workers are very much like, a dog can be eating filet mignon, but if a squirrel runs by, it's like, I see a shiny thing. So there's another aspect of it too, that I'm rambling now, I realize it, but that's why we edit things. My experience with intellectual things is that we all start seeing the world as dualists, black and white. There are right and wrong answers. Authority figures have right or wrong answers. And then if we are in environments where we have the right balance between challenge and support, we move out of the dualistic mindset and go into a mindset where the world is one great gray mass where all ideas are equally good. Well, that doesn't work very well because all ideas are not equally good. And then we get into if we're confronted with the right environment of a balance between challenge and support, we put on a set of glasses that allow us to see the world as a mass of variations of gray, from very dark gray, almost black, to very light gray, almost white, where the answers to the important questions are answered in better or worse terms rather than absolutely right or wrong terms. And this is a stage where we can grow to become comfortable with ambiguity. The problem is that most of us are not put in environments where there's a balance between challenge and support. Too much challenge, people run away. They get entrenched in their beliefs. Too much support, there's really no reason to change because you must be right. Everybody agrees with you. And so it's incumbent upon us as leaders to create environments where we challenge people, but then support them as they struggle, so they can move to the point where they can live. They can be comfortable in the ambiguity that is life. Life is ambiguous. And then they can make choices They can make intellectually sophisticated choices about what they believe based on their own experience and the evidence they've been able to accumulate. And they have the intellectual capacity to continually re-examine those early commitments, so that as they learn more about the world, they can amend what they thought their first commitment should be. But that takes an extraordinary kind of environment where people can actually be challenged without running backwards, without being threatened, to be challenged without being threatened. And I think that's our challenge as leaders. It's certainly our challenge as religious leaders to challenge how people see the world without their feeling we're attacking them. Another thing I've learned is that the more closely we hold an opinion, the more likely we are to see a challenge to that opinion as a personal attack. And so in case you haven't picked up on it, I've just described political life in the United States in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your influence on the political world a little bit next.
Yeah.
You've had the chance to rub shoulders with governors, senators, representatives, congressmen. What is it like, working with them or trying to, I'm going to use the words, talk some sense into them?
Well, Howard Baker once said that the most important thing to remember when interacting with a politician is to always start your sentence with, Congressman, I may be wrong, but here's what I think. And I think there's great wisdom in that. And you don't just say it, you have to actually believe that you might be wrong. It takes a sense of intellectual modesty. Intellectual humility is really key, because we all may be wrong. We're all trying to make decisions in a universe of limited facts and limited perspectives. And I think the most important mark of intellectual maturity is whether we can honestly say that intelligent people can disagree. Because most people don't think that. Most people in our adolescence, we think anybody who disagrees with us is wrong, and far too many of us never get out of our intellectual adolescence. So dealing with power, with people who have power and authority, to sit down and say, I could be wrong, but based on the data I've accumulated, based on the evidence I've accumulated, based on my own core values, this is what I think we should be doing, and this is why. And then shut up and listen.
So then you ended up more right or more wrong. What happened?
Oh, maybe it's not about right or wrong, Doug.
Yeah.
No. If it's the best thing you can say, hey, if they follow his advice,
I think that's exactly right.
That created the outcomes we desire. Yeah.
I think that the answer, I think we really make progress as human beings through incremental change. Every once in a while, there may be something that happens that really changes the paradigm. But there aren't very many paradigm changes, and we have to constantly make progress, and we make progress in small steps. But the problem is when we stop listening to each other, we create environments that have too much challenge and not enough support, and people actually move backwards. They can become more entrenched in their positions. And so I know that incrementalism is a bad word for a lot of people, but for me, constant progress is a form of evolution.
Thanks for checking out part 1 of our conversation. Tune in next week for part 2. Until next time, we're the Brain Prophets.